You're listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks, a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation about living and leading worship. Visit kurtisparks.com to learn more and check out Kurtis's books and latest resources for your worship team. Worshipology is a part of the Worship Leader Magazine podcast network. Worship Leader Magazine has a heart to equip spirit-led worship leaders with practical tools, theological insight, and encouragement for the local church. Today's episode is brought to you by PraiseCharts. Whatever resources you're looking for on the latest songs in today's worship music, PraiseCharts has you ready to go. Whether you need chord charts, lead sheets, or full orchestrations, everything is formatted for your team and available for instant download. Stay current, save time, and lead with confidence. Check out PraiseCharts.com today and get your hands on the freshest songs for Sunday. In this episode of Worshipology, Kurtis sits down with Kathryn Roelofs, co-author of the new book, Leading Worship for Workers from Baker Publishing. In this book, two innovators in the global faith and work movement encourage church leaders to think critically about the congregations they serve. You'll learn to create more relevant, engaging services for your congregation, guidance on how to intentionally craft elements of worship through the service, including prayers, songs, and liturgies for all callings of life. You'll also discover innovative worship ideas and resources to help ministry teams integrate faith at work themes into weekly service. Check out the link in the show notes to pick up your copy of Leading Worship for Workers. Now, here's today's episode of Worshipology.
Well, hey, thanks so much for listening to the Worshipology podcast. This is a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation all about living and leading worship, and really excited about today's conversation. I am talking with Kathryn Roelofs. She co-authored a book called Leading Worship for Workers. There's a website that coincides with the book called worshipforworkers.com. We're going to get into all of that. Kathryn, what's up?
Hey, thanks for having me today, Kurtis. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, no, I see that you're in the DC area. You're in Silver Spring. How long have you been there? Because that area is fun for me.
I've been in this area for close to 20 years now. And I think when we settled here, we didn't expect to end up here permanently, but it kind of, it grabs a hold of you and then you end up stuck. So, yep, I'm just geographically like 15 miles north of Washington, D.C., for those who don't know the area.
Yeah, I love the DC area. So many amazing parts all around our nation's capital. Okay, so let's dial this back. Like, you are writing resources, creating resources. When did it all start for you, like leading worship and writing?
So I often tell people that my heart for this project, for leading worship for workers, largely started because I got thrown into a congregation that already did it.
Okay.
So I took a job in Washington, D.C. at a congregation in Northeast Washington, D.C. That's about 70% federal employees of the government. And Kurtis, I know you served in a D.C. church as well.
Yeah.
But when you have a congregation that is so deeply ingrained with one kind of work in general, it's really hard to have a church that does the worship divide that we talk about in the book. People don't necessarily have the option of like leaving their work at the door. It just kind of becomes inherent to a part of like who the congregation is and its DNA. So here I am straight out of college, had a degree in music and worship, and jumped into this little congregation in Northeast DC where all of a sudden their work kind of became central to who they were as worshiping people. And all of the things within me that said, no, like your work isn't allowed in worship. Like we might be able to pray for it, especially politics. I mean, let's be real. But work doesn't belong in worship in this way. And so jumping into a congregation that naturally did that, it was a bit of a learning curve, but I saw the beauty of it so quickly that serving there over 20 years, honestly, is what formed me for this position and for this passion for worship for workers.
Wow, it's such a unique area. And I mean, yeah, you're working with people that are used to lobbying. They're working on the Hill. Some of them are in government and politics, and it's just a wild thing. Talk to me a little bit about those merging worlds where you have work and worship, and so many people separate those worlds, but honestly, they go hand in hand. And when you look at the gospel, when you look at the Christian life, there shouldn't be two separate lives of this is your work life and this is your worship life. They really should be blended together. Talk to us a little bit about that. How does that happen, Kathryn?
Yeah. Well, first of all, to be clear, leading worship for workers is not just for people who live in Washington, D.C.
Okay. That's good.
The beginning of it, we really encourage worship directors and pastors to do a deep dive into understanding who their congregation is vocationally.
Wow.
Like we generally will look out, when you step up onto the stage on a Sunday morning, you look out and you see people, but do you ever really think about who they are the rest of the week long?
Wow.
What they do for a living and what it is that they carry with them.
Yeah.
You think about your medical professionals and what they have faced and what they have endured, some of the triumphs and also some of the pain that they carry with them.
Wow.
Think about teachers at the end of this school year. It's kind of in the final stretch, that final sprint. What is it that they carry with them into worship?
Wow.
And is the worship that you are crafting and you are leading for them, speaking to them in a whole and holistic way as who they are, as human beings the rest of the week long?
Yeah.
So a lot of the work is not just to isolate worship as the 3-hour or 2-hour, however long event that you have during the week, but recognizing its formative nature in regards to the people in which it's serving every week. So the first chapter really does encourage like a deep dive, like an audit of your congregation. Have you ever really thought about who your people are vocationally and how that changes and affects the way that they show up to worship, but also the way that you engage them spiritually and then send them back out into whatever it is that their week holds ahead of them.
Wow, that's amazing. That's one thing we talk a lot about on this podcast is not just staying in the green room. If you're a worship leader or a worship team member, like get out into the rows, get out into the congregation and the lobby spaces and meet your people and talk to your people and get to know what they're all about. Get to know where they work and their family and their life outside of just the 3 hours maximum, right? I mean, well, most of our church services aren't even that long, but like, the hour and a half service is not enough to get to know your people. You really have to do life with them. And talk to us a little bit about that. Is it just getting out of the green room on a Sunday, or is it more than that? Is it, coffees on a Monday, small group on a Wednesday? What does that look like to really get out and know your people? And are there any, tricks and trades that you've learned as you guys have been writing this book, Kathryn?
Yeah. I've often told people that this book is kind of an intersection of worship leadership meets pastoral care, meets pastoral curiosity, kind of a 3-prong approach, that it's not just about leading a really great set and good leadership on a Sunday morning. It's planning to lead people in such a way that you are pastoring them through worship experience.
Wow.
And so it's one thing to know your people, to know this person teaches 3rd grade.
Yeah.
And it's another to really understand or seek to understand as a worship leader, what are the specific burdens that they carry with them on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
My in-laws are in a largely agrarian community, right, with farmers. And they've had significant flooding lately. And so those who show up to worship who have experienced flooding, what are their primary emotions? What are their fears that they're carrying? Loss of a crop that is not just going to impact them this upcoming week, it's going to impact them the whole year long. And if you see not just Joe the farmer, but Joe who is worried about his livelihood, about all of the employees that are underneath him for the upcoming year, how does that change the way that you start Waymaker on a Sunday morning?
Wow.
What are words that can be said, even just short and simply, to allow and to invite people in diverse places and diverse working experiences to bring their burdens before God in an authentic way that is honest before God, but also the ability to be honest with one another.
Wow. I love that. I love the fact that like you're matching the reality of our world, right? We have work, we have lives, we have hardships, but also lining us up in worship to the reality of heaven. Like worship is transformative, right? Like we're basically realizing that like we live in the kingdom of earth, but we are here to bring about the kingdom of God and to live out these amazing attributes of the kingdom of heaven. Like talk to us a little bit about that. Like when Jesus prayed, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. How have you seen that, transform the way that your people live in church, where they take it out on a Sunday when they leave the worship service? How do they go about basically living a kingdom life and taking that into their workplace, taking that into their homes, taking that into their relationships outside of the worship service, because that's really what we're here for. Not just those 2 hours, 3 hours on a Sunday, but to live this out kingdom, to love one another, to honor one another, to live this New Testament life in our daily living.
Oh, I love that. We could dive into that. That could be a whole episode onto itself here.
Yeah.
I think two things come to mind though for me, Kurtis. The first is one of my favorite quotes by an author named Jamie Smith.
Okay.
Who says, "If all of life is to be worship, the sanctuary is the place to practice."
Oh, that's good.
And so I'm going to repeat that again.
Yeah.
If all of life is to be worship, the sanctuary is the place where we practice.
Wow.
It's the place where we rehearse, where we learn how. And so as you engage people in acts of thanksgiving and praise, acts of submission before God, those are rehearsing patterns that you hope that they engage all week long in their work. And those are those kingdom breakthrough moments where somebody shows up into a workplace and instead of having their noses up and their chests puffed out, they come in with a posture of humility.
Wow.
And a posture of Christ-likeness where what the culture around them or what their workplace demands is something completely different of them. But their rehearsal of those worship practices in the sanctuary, those impact and those change the way that they show up for their work on Monday morning.
Amazing. Wow.
And if you think about that, that's every worship leader's goal, whether you realize it or not, that the practices that you engage, the songs that you sing, the words that you put on people's lips, that they impact the way that they live the rest of their lives in their kingdom work.
Wow.
But I also think it's important that we recognize people's kingdom work in their daily living.
Yeah.
That children, when they go off to school, they don't just go to school because it's mandated of them, of the government, or they have to go and they have to learn. That's kingdom work that children engage every day as they grow and they create and they learn. Same for our retirees. Just because your vocational location has changed, your vocational calling has not changed.
Wow, that's really good.
And so how are those rhythms and those rehearsals in the sanctuary preparing all of God's people to go out into their kingdom work every week?
Wow, that's so good. It's interesting to me because I think so many people, they think of ministry and the calling of God to be just for church staff and worship leaders and pastors and small group. No, like ministry is just for church staff people. We know what it says in Ephesians chapter 4, right? That we, the ministry exists to equip the saints. It's our people in the seats that are really going out and doing ministry and going into their workplaces and bringing about the gospel and bringing about the kingdom of God. The Great Commission is not just for church staff people, it's for all people. Talk to us a little bit about that and how have you seen that play out as you guys have been writing this?
Thank God. Thank the Lord for that too, Kurtis, that it's not all on us.
Oh man, praise God. Well, talk to us a little bit about that. How have you seen the resources that you guys are creating in this new book help people connect those two worlds?
Yeah, we do. We actually have a whole chapter or a whole section dedicated just to the concept of how to engage. We call worship leaders, you are the priests to the priesthood of all believers.
Oh, wow.
That it is your role to equip and to serve God's people who go out on mission every single week. We have the idea in there. We have a whole list of ideas around this idea of a vocational mission map. Here's a really just practical, tangible thing to kind of latch onto. But I've seen it done in churches, and it's just changed the way that they not only view mission, but view discipleship practices and view outreach.
Oh, wow.
Imagine... So for you or for me, hanging a map of the Washington, D.C. area or the Virginia area in your sanctuary, and inviting people to place a pin where it is that they will go to work the very next day.
Wow.
Some churches used to have missionary maps, right? Where you have the map of the whole world and you have your missionaries in Uganda and you have your missionaries in Brazil. But the recognition that It is not just paid ministry staff. It is not just missionaries who go out on God's mission. The person who goes and serves at the convenience store around the corner, that's their parish. That's the parish in which God has called them to serve. That's their mission field.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I'm hearing this phrase on mission, like live on mission, more and more. I'm seeing it, everywhere on social media, and we use that phrase a lot in our church. What does it mean to live on mission? And have you found there to be kind of like a general, let's call it a mission statement that people can live by when they're trying to merge their work and their worship, when they're trying to basically live out these kingdom principles in their everyday living in their jobs? What does it look like to live on mission, Kathryn? Yeah.
I don't think that's a prescriptive thing, Kurtis.
Okay.
I kind of wonder if that's contextual to every congregation and every different worker.
Wow. Yeah.
Because one thing we also encourage is like, don't make broad assumptions about vocations, right? That like, every doctor or nurse must be feeling this right now, or their mission is in the operating room.
Interesting.
Encourage people to find that within themselves and within their workplaces on their own, because it's going to be much more impactful if they can name that for themselves and also be able to name that for you. It's a specific way in which I can engage you and I can pray for you, but also it encourages them to do the recognition work on their own that as I work with this particularly difficult patient this week, this is where I'm on mission.
Wow.
Going back to what we were a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, like those moments where you send people on mission or you send people to do kingdom work. One section of the book that we really go into is the sending portion of whatever the end of your worship service looks like.
Yeah.
And I kind of joke around with it. I'm like, usually that's where we've all run out of steam and we've run out of time. And so the last person to close basically is like, have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, bye.
But that those last moments of worship are the most formative moments that a worker can engage all week long, and they should be the most powerful.
Wow.
Those last words out of the worship leader or the pastor's mouth, those should be what resonate with them all week long.
So good.
With a recognition that God's blessings aren't meant to stay contained in the sanctuary. They're meant to equip and empower God's people to go out into the world, to go and engage God's mission.
Yeah.
And again, that's going to look different for everybody.
Wow.
One thing I've liked to do is like invite people to a moment of just silence. The awkward moment where you say, hey, I want all of you to pull out your cell phones.
Okay.
Like, what? What are you asking me to do? And open your calendar app.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And look through what your week holds this week. And maybe they'll see a doctor's appointment that they don't want to go to, or they see the board meeting that they didn't want to have, or they see a lot of empty space where they wish they had employment for the week, but they don't.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But then say those final words of blessing and those final words of charge. God goes with you. God goes before you and behind you. So go into God's world with very tangible things in mind for each of God's people, of where God is sending them and where God promises to be with them through the presence of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. I love that. One of my favorite things that we've done at our church recently is we put up this sign as people leave and they go out in the parking lot. There's a sign that says, now you're entering the mission field. And I think that's a great reminder. Like it's an easy, and at the end of our service, we end with the prayer of blessing from number 6, may the Lord bless and keep you. And it's sending them out. I think that's a huge thing that you mentioned, this whole idea of being commissioned and sent out. The apostles, the word apostle literally means sent one, so that people can realize, hey, I am sent out on mission and I'm entering the mission field now. What are some other maybe practical places in our church service, in our worship flow, where we can be more intentional about putting those things that tie in your everyday living with the worship of God? Is it a teaching moment? Is it, you mentioned this thing before, Waymaker, where it was like, the flooding thing, and it kind of tied in that it took it beyond just the music. What are some other areas like testimony or scripture or teaching moment where you've seen that practically play out?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's another good topic that I feel like we could spend a ton of time on.
Let's go.
Again, I'm going to say that worship is so highly contextual that for your individual congregation, for all of the listeners, this is going to be yours to figure out somewhat on your own, because everybody is going to be different.
Wow.
But a couple practical things that we have in mind in the book. The first is just a recognition that people come with different emotions on a Sunday morning, and we as worship leaders would be really wise to recognize that. That of course we come full of joy and full of praise and gratitude for all that God has done for us through the work of Jesus Christ, and we want to celebrate that. You want to invite people into worship to be able to celebrate and to worship God.
Yeah.
Also need to recognize that people come with a lot of different burdens on their hearts as well.
Wow.
So let's say Joy in the House of the Lord is your first song on a Sunday morning, a really simple framing to say, there is joy in the house of the Lord. And for those who that has been your experience this week, we encourage you to sing full-hearted that there is joy in the house of the Lord.
Yeah.
But know that for those of you who are carrying burdens from your week, from whatever it is that you've experienced this week, number one, there's people that will sing for you this morning, sing on your behalf, and love and care for you in that way. And number two, you can sing out of a declaration of what you know to be true, even if that's not your experience in the moment today.
Wow, that's so good.
An invitational posture for people to bring an honest and more holistic version of themselves to worship. They don't need to just put on their spiritual clothing that they haven't necessarily worn all week long. They don't have to disrobe of what it is that they're carrying with them. That the one place they should be able to bring that is before God and before the community of God's people around them. So creating more space for that.
Wow. I'm reminded of a conversation I had recently with Glenn Packiam on this podcast, and love Glenn. And he actually was talking about the community of faith, that like the community around you in a service of worship, like when you are low in your faith, the person to your right and to your left, they can be that Aaron and Hur and lift your arms in those low moments and help you with your faith. And I think it's something so beautiful, because like community is such a huge thing, right? You know, you've got community in the world and their sense of it and their idea of it, but then you got community in the body of Christ, and it's really the blueprint for what amazing fellowship could look like. But ministry can be lonely. Ministry can be hard. And I talk to so many worship leaders who they do feel lonely. And I mean, and it can be a silo kind of ministry. I mean, and we've heard that phrase, you know, alone you go fast, together you go far. Talk to us a little bit about the community aspect in church, and how do we take that out into our workplace? How do we show this world that has a skewed sense of community, a kingdom type of community in everyday life?
One thing I like to say is that worship is not a spectator sport, and it's also not like corporate worship. When we gather on a Sunday morning, it's not an individual activity.
Wow, yeah.
So many of the songs that we sing have I and me language, but you are never singing in isolation. You're never worshiping in isolation.
Wow.
Dude,
right?
It's not a
oh my gosh,
sport.
that's interesting. You know, I had to pause you there, because like, you're right. Like in a lot of our songs, it is like we need more corporate songs to say we, because it's community.
I know. And I'm here. Okay. Also, CCLI, hear me say, I'm not encouraging everybody to go and rewrite lyrics, because that's not something that we do, nor is that something that we're allowed to do.
No, we're not saying that.
But hey, songwriters out there.
Yeah.
Here's a call to remember that it's not just Jesus and me and Jesus moment, that we worship as a body.
Let's go.
But again, you can correct that really quickly as a worship leader with a single sentence that while we sing this morning about I will not be silent, or that language, we remember that we worship as a community. So whether you're singing for yourself or whether you're singing for those that are around you, I invite you as a body to sing and to join your voices in song.
That's so good.
But again, if all of life is to be worship, the sanctuary is the place to practice. We are practicing what it means to be with one another, for one another, and recognize each other in new ways. I also wonder whether a trend in churches these days is just a very surface level experience.
Oh, wow.
where we get to know one another and we know basic things about each other. But going down into that next level, you're like, that's only for my small group and my therapist. We're not going to go there. That's not allowed in church.
Nice.
That's not fair game for church members.
Oh, man.
But you think about what an authentic Christian community should be for one another. It should be a place to hold those burdens with each other. And I wondered if testimony is the place to start to engage that.
Yeah.
And it takes a couple of brave souls to say, hey, here's what's really going on in my life, and here's ways that you can pray for me.
Wow. Yeah.
We have a whole section on testimony, specifically through the lens of vocational testimonies. We frame it as your trumpets of praise, your ashes of repentance. What are the things for which you recognize in your workplace that you need to confess to God?
Wow.
Either on behalf of yourself or on behalf of your whole industry in your workplaces.
Wow.
But your trumpets of praise, your ashes of repentance, your tears of lament. What are the things in the workplace or in your daily living on the whole that bring you to tears?
Wow.
What are your petitions? And what are your first fruits? What are the things that you are super proud of that you offer up to God?
Wow, that's so cool. I love that.
When we sing praises, they should have tangible reminders within our heads of what it is that we're praising God for today. What are we worshiping God for God's attributes, but also for what God has done in and through us this week? What are things that we can offer up and we can lift up to God?
Wow. I think a lot of people probably grew up with this mentality of like, oh, you need to leave all of your junk at the door. Like, don't bring that into church. All of your pain and your hardships of the week, like leave. And I think Jesus is always beckoning us to know, come, bring that to the foot of the cross. Cast all your cares on me because I care for you. And it's just this disconnect between our everyday life and then what happens when we come to church. And it's like, no, we need to bring all that. Like when we come into a church service where 2 or 3 are gathered, there he is in our midst. Why would we not want to bring all of that to the foot of the cross and leave our pain and leave our burdens there? Because Jesus died for us. He died so that we could have a full life and live life to the full, right? And so it's interesting because, you've been talking a little bit about the things that people bring into a worship service. They bring their work with them. They bring their lives with them. And why wouldn't they? That's who they are. That's what makes it authentic, right? Like not hiding and putting on a church face, but like being real and bringing their full selves into a church context. People are doing that anyway. Talk to us a little bit about, how to discover what people are bringing in. And I guess it really does fold back into knowing your congregation, right? Like how do you get to know the people in your congregation so that you can know their stories, so that you can know like, hey, the worship songs we're choosing, whether it's 3 or 4 songs that we're choosing on a Sunday, they're actually meeting you where you're at. They're actually the songs that you need to sing. Like, I guess my question would be, how can we best go about learning our people and being a part of that congregation? Because there are so many opportunities to slip in and slip out and never get to know anybody. And look, I'm an extrovert, but even I can get caught in this trap of like, it's all about the songs and you never get an opportunity, or you never make the opportunity, I should say, to really get to know your people. How do we do that?
Oh, I'm curious how and where you have seen that. So I'm going to flip it back and I'm going to ask you, how and where have you seen that done well? And how have you seen people struggle with it? If you can think of tangible examples.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've definitely had seasons in my life where ministry was lonely. And the reason was because I made it all about the music.
Yeah.
Like it was all about the songs. It was all about, and we were writing our own original songs. There was a season where we were signed with a record label. And so writing songs to try to get on this project and writing songs to try to, you say you're writing songs to reach people, but really it's all about the music. It's like you're writing songs to scratch your musical itch and really just to implement your gift and all that stuff. So the seasons where I felt like ministry was lonely was where I made it all about the music. Now, the seasons where I started to realize it's not just about the songs, it's not just about the music, was church planting. Like I was planning a church in Nashville, Tennessee, and when you're a church planter, when you're a lead pastor, it cannot be all about the music. It has to be all about the people. And I remember going out and meeting with our kids team, and going out and meeting with, people that were on our production and people that were out in the parking lot, and just getting to know their stories, going to coffee with them, going to their homes, and like sharing dinner over a table and getting to know their lives. And really, that's where it comes into play. And I think when ministry becomes more about people and less about the task at hand, that's when you're really winning in ministry. And right now, I've got a small group of guys. They're actually all coming over to my house this weekend for dinner, and we're going to break bread together, and we're going to hear each other's lives and share each other's lives. And, it's intentional, because those moments don't create themselves. And so, I've had to work at this small group. I've had to, and it's inconvenient. Ministry and community and friendship and fellowship is all, you have to be intentional about that. And it's hard. But I think those are the moments that I've realized, okay, when it's about people and not just the music, I feel like I'm doing a little bit better in life. I'm doing a little bit better in ministry. I mean, but the reality is community is not easy. Community is messy. Community is hard. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are maybe afraid to step into community. They want to be last person in service, first person out of service, and slip in and maybe sit on the back row. Talk to that person that, maybe they've dealt with a little bit of church hurt, or they've been burned by relationships. And it's like, man, it's so worth it if you just get back into the community of faith, if you take that risk to build relationships, to build friends. Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
I think all worship leaders need to reckon with the fact that there is beauty in community, and there's also a lot of brokenness within community.
Yeah. Wow.
And so while we are leading God's people, we need to hold those two things in tension.
Yeah.
That not only have we been hurt in these spaces, we also go out and we hurt other people in those spaces.
Wow. Yeah.
Which again, then how are we rehearsing patterns of being able to apologize to one another, being able to be open-handed?
Wow.
It strikes me that a lot of times we sing, "Oh, come to the altar, the Father's arms are open wide," but we come with clenched fists. Whether they are clenched because we can't release something within ourselves, or whether we've got them clenched because we're fists up, out of self-defense mode. But those patterns over time, are you leading worship in such a way that you're encouraging an open-handed posture for people, for themselves, but also for their community around them? And of course, that's going to come with a lot of risk. Of course, that's going to come with the possibility for further injury, just because we are part of a broken community. But are we rehearsing the right patterns within people and forming them? I believe that worship is a formative thing. You don't change people in one worship service alone. You change them with a steady diet of being fed over time with the patterns that you hope that they engage in their daily living.
Wow.
We use this term in the book, which I think it's a little bit of overkill. And if I went back, I probably would have deleted it and tried over again. But like liturgical fundamentalism, the idea that one worship service is going to change everything and erase all of the stuff that has happened in your workplace. And it's also going to just like change you completely moving forward. We believe in like a slow, steady diet of how worship forms and changes you. It happens over time. And it doesn't always happen seamlessly, right? Like, I wish that like following Jesus was like a straight linear line that I could just like follow on the right path and do the right things and everything would be fine. But of course, you and I both know that that's not the case. That it's a winding road that's often filled with disappointment. It's filled with setbacks, but it's always, always lined with the grace of God, which keeps us and holds us steady.
Wow. You said something in there. You said worship is formative. And it's interesting. I'm thinking in about a month's time, I'm going to be preaching a message. We're in a series on the book of Romans. I'm preaching on Romans 12:1 and 12:2, both of those verses. And as worship leaders, we all know and love Romans 12:1, in view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as living sacrifice. We love that worship verse. But the very next verse, do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You don't always think of those two verses going hand in hand. It's like they're two very different things. But then when you kind of zoom in a little bit, Kathryn, it's like, wait a minute, they go really well together. Like they actually work together. Talk to us a little bit about that, because, you said worship is formative. And I think, worship is what leads to transformation. Worship is what leads to not being conformed to the pattern of this world. Like, what is the tension of those two verses? And then what is the connectivity of Romans 12:1 and 2?
It's kind of a mindset shift, especially for worship leaders, that I think we are so focused on getting 2 hours right? Like you want that bridge to sing, you want that transition to be perfect, and you rehearse those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But if you take a step back and you think about, what are you rehearsing God's people for the rest of the week? It's not to hit that perfect bridge or that key change just spot on, right? What are you actually rehearsing God's people for? You're rehearsing them for being transformed, for not conforming to the way that the workplace is trying to form them, right? With the recognition that, like, there is a lot out there that is trying to form God's people and deforming them throughout the week. So what patterns are you putting in place to conform them to Christ-likeness? And that goes, again, much further beyond just the music. We talked about that a little bit already. We are trying to best utilize those 2 hours that we have together, which are sacred times together, to do the transformative work, not the performative, but the transformative work of God's people. So how are you shaping them and forming them through those 2 hours to engage God's world? I've even wondered, encourage people to take a step back and to think about what people encounter throughout the week, what their weeks must look like. I call that pastoral curiosity. Put on your pastoral curiosity for a second.
Love it.
Think about what people's experiences are like. Think about what the place of silence might have in conforming and transforming in a world that's so loud, that screams at you through your workplace, through traffic, through social media, through all of those things. What would a place of silence look like in terms of how that would transform God's people?
Wow. That's really good.
Think about those patterns and those different ways. So I don't know, off the top of my head, that's kind of what comes to mind with Romans 12. That work.
Wow. I love that. What are we rehearsing God's people for? And the idea, like, don't be conformed to the patterns of so what are the patterns in worship that we're literally like rehearsing for the rest of our daily lives? And are we being more transformative or performative? I love that. One of the things that as I was looking on your guys' website, worshipforworkers.com, you talk about songs, prayers, and liturgies and how they intersect with our everyday lives. That word liturgy, I've always heard that in kind of a church context, obviously, but like, what does it look like to have songs, prayers, and liturgies in every day, Monday through Saturday, right?
So I think liturgy also gets it's developed a bad rep, right?
Yeah.
Like you hear the word liturgy and you associate it with like a high church tradition that like you have a set order that you have to follow every single week.
While wearing robes, right?
Start here, end here. Yes, while wearing robes, and maybe there's smoke, but not like the smoke machine kind, right? But
not the haze, the incense.
The actual word liturgy in Greek, liturgia, it means the work of the people.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't mean like a stilted order that you follow from start to finish. The word liturgy embodied, it means the work of God's people. And so what it says is that our goal in liturgy, so whatever your church does on that Sunday morning, the ultimate goal of it is the engagement in the work of God's people. who are engaged in their bodies and in their souls in this worship of God, in hearing what God has to say and responding back to God in prayer and in song and in gratitude. Liturgy is the work of the people. And what we hope happens in the sanctuary with the work of God's people is the same thing we hope happens in the workplace, that they scatter and they go forth every week to do the work of God's people, their liturgies in their places of work. And that doesn't look like a spoken refrain, or it doesn't look like singing the exact same song. Everybody's liturgy is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
I had a fun conversation with somebody the other day who's like, I work from home. Like, I work from home. I'm in my home office every day. I have no opportunity for like spiritual like practices or liturgies like that in my home office. And I'm like, what would it look like to have just a short prayer that you say on your way down to your coffee maker to pour yourself a cup of coffee?
Love it.
Take a walk around like the perimeter of your house and say a prayer over your workstation for the day and the work that God has in front of you for the day. A small prayer that as you boot up your computer or as you shut it down for the day, a meaningful moment of connection with God.
Wow.
Those liturgies, the work of God's people, it's all around you. It's not contained to a certain form of worship. It's not contained to the sanctuary. It should be an all of life work of God's people.
Wow. You're blowing my mind right now with that Greek translation of liturgy, because I think a lot of us, and let's talk about this, because, the word for worship, if we're going to look at some Hebrew and Greek and get some context for that, like, let's define the word worship. Now, I remember doing some studies on the word avodah, which is kind of traces all the way back to Adam in the garden. And it was where worship connected with his daily work, what he was offering to the Lord. Let's unpack that a little bit. Like, what have you discovered as you've been creating resources when it comes to maybe the original Greek and Hebrew for the actual word worship, whether it's avodah or something else, Kathryn?
The word worship. Oh,
yeah.
That's like an entire like worship course 101, right? Like historical worship 101.
Let's do it.
I'm going to turn it a little bit and I'm going to talk about the practices of the early church,
okay,
which embody that avodah idea. And also give us a really practical way to engage this like worship for workers thing that we're talking about. So the early church, Pentateuch, all of those, they never came to worship empty-handed.
Wow.
They always came before the Lord bearing the work of their hands. Think about it. They brought the grain from their fields. They brought the first fruits that had appeared on the vine. They brought the loaves of bread they had just baked in their ovens and the olives they had just harvested. They never came to worship empty-handed. They came bringing something of themselves and something from themselves. And they walk into worship carrying that, and it is received as a fragrant offering of praise before God.
Wow.
Not only is it received as an offering, it's also used to feed the body.
Wow.
It's used to, the bread that was just baked in the oven. It's used for communion. It's used for the Lord's Supper.
Beautiful. Wow.
What we carry with us into worship should be our true and authentic selves and something of ourselves that is meaningful. We don't have first fruits in the same way because a lot of us largely are not farmers, right?
Yeah.
But what is it that I encourage people to think, what is it that you carry with you into worship?
Right. Yeah.
And how can you offer that up to God as an offering of thanksgiving, an offering of praise, and something to be used for the greater good of God's community around you to enrich the body as you worship together?
Wow.
Your avodah, your work, is not separate from what it is that you do in worship. Those things are intrinsically combined. We say that work and worship is not a fad. Actually, the more modern interpretation of it is that there is some kind of divide that we need to separate those two things. It's actually historically, according to the early church and according to the biblical texts, that it's always been intertwined. Work and worship have gone hand in hand. The more fatty thing is that we're like, oh no, they don't belong together.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
And we see this really clearly. We encourage people to examine their offering practices. Almost all churches do online giving because it's great. It's super convenient.
Yeah.
And you can pay the church in the same way that you pay like your wastewater bill or your Netflix bill from week to week.
Wow. Wow.
But we think about the fact that offering was never just about money. It's about something of ourselves. What is it that we are giving of ourselves this week? What's one thing that you're proud of that you made with your hands that's represented in the money that you give? We're not funding God's kingdom. We're building God's kingdom. And in order to build God's kingdom, we have to be workers in that kingdom.
Yeah.
So as the transaction leaves your bank account, what is it that you're really offering to God this week?
Wow.
As your act of worship this week?
That's so good.
And a simple invitation, like if you have a time of offering in your church, we know many of you have given online. What is it? Think back through your week. Think back through the very work of your hands that has earned the money that you have offered to God. What are the tangible things that you bring before God this week?
Wow. Man, you got my wheels spinning right now.
Right?
I mean, that is just so good. I think I feel challenged and inspired by this conversation. I don't know where our time has gone, but I have to ask you this one question. This is something that we ask every single person on this podcast. What is the Holy Spirit speaking to you right now? What do you feel like the Lord has just been resonating on your heart as you've been creating this resource, and as you guys have just recently released this book? What is it really that you feel like the Lord has been stirring in you as it pertains to worship for workers?
You said something earlier, Kurtis, that really stuck with me, and it's the lonely nature of what it means to be in full-time ministry.
Yep, it's true.
But I also have a great fear that loneliness is going to be the next pandemic that affects the globe in really devastating ways. And worship can't be the place that feeds that.
Wow.
That if worship is the place where you feel the most lonely in your week, I fear that, right? That our sanctuaries and our spaces of worship are becoming places where we feel like some kind of disconnect within us, that something isn't right here. I'm supposed to feel this way, but I actually feel this way. Where can I be honest, and where can I actually be my true and full self? Sanctuary and the worship place cannot be the place that fosters a pandemic of loneliness, in a place where we feel like we cannot be our full selves before God and before one another. And our worship practices, I don't want them to trend in that direction. And I see ways in which it could, and I see ways in which we can combat that as leaders, or recognize that as leaders, and do that formative and transformative work of whole and holistic, wholehearted people that worship before God each and every week.
Wow.
So that's something that's been stirring in my heart and in my head lately.
That's so good. What a challenge. Worship cannot be a space where loneliness is facilitated. Wow. I think all of us are going to be hanging on to so many nuggets from this conversation. Look, I don't say this often, but man, I really do believe that this book, Leading Worship for Workers, is going to be so helpful, and I think everybody would do well to get their hands on it. Go to worshipforworkers.com, check out the website, see the resources. Kathryn, thank you so much for spending some time with us on Worshipology. We're going to put links in our show notes on how you can find out more about Kathryn and the work that she's doing, as well as the book. This has been a true joy today.
Thanks so much, Kurtis. Have a great one.
You've been listening to Worshipology with Kurtis Parks. Visit kurtisparks.com to learn more and check out Kurtis's books and resources for worship leaders and teams. Worshipology is part of the Worship Leader Magazine podcast network, brought to you by Worship Leader Magazine. Today's episode was sponsored by PraiseCharts. Visit PraiseCharts.com and get everything you need for your worship team today.